what is it? It's a second or third revolution
Yeah.
technology,
And justify having spent so many millions without some kind of commitment.
This is not the first and the last discussion that we're gonna
I hope
have. All right, Mr. Moyo, welcome to the Engineering in Africa podcast. And thank you very much for taking time to talk to us. So, as I've briefed you, the Engineering in Africa podcast, what we're trying to do is to create a platform where engineers who work in Africa and practice in Africa can, get more information about career advancement, new technology, and innovation. So the purpose of today's talk was to look at energy. So I know that you part of the Omang group, and I'll just give you an opportunity to tell us more about what Omang is all about. But before I do that, I just wanted to give some context on what I wanted to talk about. So we know that there's issues of climate change, which obviously affect Africa. There's the whole issues of renewable energy, and with Eskom, with the independent power producers, there's a lot of talk about the affordability of energy, especially from an Eskom point of view. But I also wanted to see if does Omang have more insights about the renewable energy challenges outside of South Africa, what's happening in other African countries, and if you've got insights on that and those, and then we'll be discussing those type of information. And also I wanted to talk about the solutions that you guys have, and are those solutions local, and and if they're not local, what can we do as engineers? So you're an electrical engineer, I'm a mechanical engineer, and what can we do to step up the game of engineers in South Africa, where we can design, manufacture, go and install, maintain, operate our own infrastructure and our own technology. So before we get started, can you just introduce who is Thabo Moyo, and what does the Omang Energy do exactly?
Sure, fantastic. Great. Thanks, Nkululeko, thanks for that intro. Thank you for inviting me and having me on your platform, which I think is fantastic, by the way.
Thanks,
African solutions to African problems, right? And engineering is a big part of that, I think.
Yeah.
You can't sell what you haven't made.
Yeah.
And engineers are crucial to the making of cool stuff.
Yeah.
So as you said in the intro, I'm Thabo, and my background is electrical engineering. I must confess that I'm not an engineer through and through.
Okay.
I came to the realization quite early on in my engineering career that what I enjoy about engineering is really the problem solving, right? The technical application of one's knowledge to solving material problems, and that then spans through multiple industries, multiple sectors. But be that as it may, engineer by training and background. Initially, I focused in robotics and automation. Interestingly, with Eskom as part of my master's research project, looking into automated power line inspections using drones. And unknown to me, that kind of was the segue into energy, and specifically renewable energy.
Yeah.
So I've been in the renewable energy space for about 10 years now. And primarily or initially from a pure engineering technical perspective, that the design and implementation of energy projects, spanning small scale projects such as those in residential installations, all the way up to utility scale projects under the Renewable Energy IPP program, which you would know in South Africa.
Yeah.
Also spanning countries throughout the continent, the African continent, and as far afield as India at some point.
Okay.
So quite a global in terms of energy and energy projects.
Wow, that's amazing, man.
Sure. So I've been quite fortunate, I think, in that sense, in terms of the breadth and depth of energy projects that I've been able to work on in the renewable space specifically. And it was that backdrop we're going on 2 years now, just over 18 months. Myself and 3 other co-founders co-founded Omang Energy as part of the Omang group of companies. And who we are as Omang Energies, we're primarily renewable energy independent power producers, IPPs, and project developers. Now, what that means, or what it means to be an IPP is, we are private producers of power and energy. So working independently of state utilities like Eskom in South Africa, but providing them power to customers, some of which include Eskom, by the way. As state utilities. So we focus on renewable energy projects, specifically solar PV, wind power, biogas, and hydropower.
That's amazing, man. Yeah.
The location, covering the sub-Saharan, basically, we focus on sub-Saharan Africa. To date, we've been working really around the SADC bloc, so that's South Africa, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Zambia, and of course, did I mention South Africa?
Yeah, you did.
In East Africa, we've done some work in Kenya, Tanzania, further afield in the north. We've gone into Nigeria, we've gone into Ghana, and DRC. So, as I said, the focus really is sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah.
And, we look to develop projects of varying size and varying renewable energy technologies across the breadth of the continent.
Yeah.
And in a nutshell, I think the value we aim to provide to our customers and our partners really is sustainable energy. And that's what we're about.
That's what it's about, yeah. And I think from your introduction of the Omang Group, it's very clear that you guys do believe that there's this abundance of energy or renewable energy in Africa, and we're not taking advantage of it. I'm looking at the scale of solar projects outside of Africa. We as Africans are dwarfing what the Europeans and Americans are doing. So it's great to hear that you've got all these projects going on. And what I wanted to, maybe before we get into the more interesting things that a lot of people want to hear, I want to talk about the engineering part of things.
Sure.
Yeah. So when it comes to the design part of things, do you guys do your own design from a systems point of view? So how does that work at Omang? Do you do internally the design, and then also when it comes to individual components, do you guys source from suppliers and then do the installation, or do you also have a manufacturing wing under Omang, or is your specialization just having these renewable plants and operating and maintaining them?
Sure. Okay, so to start off with the engineering and design component of your question. So our approach to market at this point in the life of our organization is really to try and partner with specialist EPCs, engineering, procurement, and construction companies. And that is because, as I said in my introduction, we are primarily a project developer and IPP/asset owner, right?
Okay.
So our business model really hinges on development, the licensing, the permitting, and coordination, project finance, and structuring, and that sort of thing. And so for specialists, and it does get quite specialist, for specialist engineering services, we look to partner with other companies.
Okay.
That being said, there's a certain amount of engineering, certainly in the early stages, that we look to do in-house. And to the extent that is required, my background in engineering and specifically renewable project comes to the fore, and I take lead on that. We do have in-house support, if you will, also from an engineering perspective. So even though we would look to outsource the EPC scope under a turnkey arrangement with our partners, we don't abdicate our responsibility to the client ultimately.
Okay.
And we would exercise some level of oversight on the technical.
But Thabo, you are downplaying your technical ability. You got a master's, right? In what was your master's? You got a master's in 4IR or something like that.
Yeah, I guess it's a component of 4IR, but it's robotics ultimately.
Yeah. So like you like they've got the big guns there at Omang, eh? So let's talk about I want to find out, like, what are your guys, like, how big is this energy problem in Africa? Like, since you guys sort of developed the business case to start this company, this energy company. So I would think that you guys didn't just wake up and say, no, let's start this energy company and, climb on the bandwagon of renewable energy. So surely there's a big problem when it comes to energy in Africa. Like, from your guys' research, how big is this problem?
No, absolutely. So as of 2019/2020, the World Bank, in conjunction with the International Energy Association, put out some numbers that suggest that some 700 million people are without access to electricity, reliable electricity. And about 75% of that 700 million resides in sub-Saharan Africa.
Sure.
So, that's a staggering number. The lighting and all the facilities that you and I take for granted, a majority of the people on the continent still consider that a luxury.
That's correct,
right?
Yeah.
And so before we talk about things like 4IR and the future, the reality is the majority of our people on the continent don't have access to clean, reliable electricity, right? And so there's no way we can start having a conversation about technology and advancing our people when they don't have electricity. And really, that speaks to our mission as Omang Energy, and the mission really is to democratize access to cheap, or rather affordable, clean electricity.
Yeah.
When we can get the majority of our people connected, then we can, build on the 4IR and everything else linked to advanced or developed civilization, right?
Yeah.
So that's the one layer, access. The other layer is reliability. So where there is access to electricity, right? This issue of load shedding is not something unique to South Africa. Right. There was some research put out by the CSIR last year, end of 2019, about that suggests that a staggering amount was lost due to load shedding, right? In the quantum of a few billion lost in the economy due to load shedding. In our neighboring country, Zambia, we were also developing quite a few projects. At some point, they had 18-hour load shedding in Zimbabwe. So 18 out of 24 hours in a day, there's no power, right? If you think about what electricity drives, right? We're talking about critical infrastructure like hospitals and in a COVID kind of scenario that we're living, you can't not have power going to hospitals and clinics, because then how else would you restore, critical medicine? Right.
Yeah.
So the energy issue, or the lack thereof, is quite a critical one on the continent, and through our business model, we're looking to address that. So profit, the question of profit and profitability aside, I think that there is a socio-economic constraint or need that has to be addressed, and there's just not enough companies and businesses to address that.
Yeah. You know, like the interesting thing that you just said, you know, when it comes to 4IR, that but it becomes very tricky as Africa to talk 4IR if we're still struggling with the first industrial revolution technology, you know, and the second industrial revolution. And look, man, we can't even build a bloody boiler plant, which is what is it? It's a second or third revolution technology, you know. So like I think I agree with you, you know, that I'm not saying that we should not look at the whole conversation of 4IR, but we still need to like fix or try to catch up on the other industrial revolutions that happen, you know. Now, with that said, I want to talk about affordability. So, can Africa afford renewable energy? The reason I ask this question is I think the biggest criticism with the IPP is the cost of the electricity. So, for instance, Eskom buys the renewable energy from you guys at a certain amount, but sell it at a lower amount to their end consumers. So now it begs to ask the question, can Africa, South Africa in this case, and Africa in general, can we afford renewable energy?
Sure. I'm going to try and answer without being too political. And look, the short answer is yes, we can afford. Right. Okay. So on a micro level within our business, for as long as we've been in operation, right, the tariffs that we've been able to present to our customers have been cheaper than the tariffs that they're currently on. Right. Okay. So there's no doubt that in private commercial discussions, our tariffs are better than what the status quo is. In fact, we wouldn't have a business case if it wasn't the case. If the tariffs we offered were higher than what customers were currently paying, you know, how could we motivate? You know, we wouldn't have a business. We wouldn't have a renewable energy market. You just couldn't convince a customer to pay more than what they're paying today, right? And so that's the first thing. On a macro level, right? There was some stats put out Q3, Q4 last year that renewables, specifically solar PV, have surpassed the LCOE, levelized cost of energy. They are now cheaper than their coal and oil counterparts.
Really?
Right. So on a macro level, renewables, specifically solar PV, aren't just about the environment and feeling good. Commercially, globally,
it's starting to make sense.
Are the cheaper option. So cheaper on a rand and cents perspective, cheaper to deployment. You know, I won't go into the whole Kusile and Migupi Power Station, how long it's taken to roll out those mega projects. One of the counterparts in the REAP, we've deployed, and I say we from an industry body perspective, deployed 6 gigawatts worth of renewables in the last just under 10 years.
Yeah.
Right. So we're cheaper and we're quicker to market. Right. To your point around Eskom having to pay more to renewables, look, PPAs, power purchase agreements, are confidential agreements, so I can't speak to what tariffs we agree. But I want to give context in that those early projects, the bid window 1 to 3 projects, yes, are rumored to have been expensive, right? But the reality is this isn't. Quite a few elements go into pricing projects, right? And a big part of it is the cost of capital, right?
Yeah.
And amongst other things, what drives up the cost of capital is risk or perceived risk, right? Now, for those early projects, these were new projects in South Africa, new ways of bringing energy to the market. And so naturally, lenders and investors price a lot of risk into their cost of capital. But you may or may not have seen that as of last year, the majority of the IPPs from those early bid windows agreed to renegotiate those tariffs, right? Because the risk has been mitigated and it's understood now. Lenders are willing to really look at finance arrangements, and everyone has come to the party and sat down with the government and the powers that be and have agreed to bring those prices down. So that's retrospectively.
Yeah.
Right.
I see.
You don't get that. Right. So the IPP community is not unreasonable. At the end of the day, we're consumers and we're people ourselves, right? We're not unreasonable.
Yeah.
So there's an element of us having to mitigate our own risks, right? Because we're deploying our own capital and we've got shareholders to answer to, we've got stakeholders to answer to. So we need to price appropriately for the inherent risk. But as soon as those risks have been mitigated and addressed with, then the costs come down. Now, as of today, right, the subsequent bid window round, so I'm talking from bid window 4, and what's recently been submitted now, the risk mitigated. Those subsequent windows and going forward into the future are already lower than the coal alternatives, right? And so the question of affordability, in my mind, is a non-issue. It's a moot point because, as I said, already today, renewables are the most cost-effective avenue for deployment, energy deployment, rapid, sustainable energy deployment.
Now, so now tell me something. So you spoke about the macro and the macro. I'm of the view that microgrids make more sense than trying to feed into the bigger the bigger electrical network from Eskom. You know what I mean? Like, what are your thoughts on that? Like having more like microgrids, for instance, where I stay, you've got complexes with like 100 households. So if you can convince those 100 households to buy into this microgrid, and then you have a lot of those microgrids that are some can be connected, some cannot be connected to Eskom. So what's your research on that or thoughts on that?
Sure. So interesting you mentioned that. We were actually actively developing quite a few micro/mini grid projects outside South Africa. So this is Zambia, Cameroon, Nigeria. And this is, 100 to 300 users in a community. We put together a small power plant for them and we build it. Now, what we're finding from a cost perspective, right? The tariffs in those kind of projects aren't as low as the tariffs we see in the bigger utility scale projects. It boils down to economies of scale, and it boils down to risk profile, right? Yeah. So the risk profile of a blue chip business that has been around for 40 years is different from the risk profile of individual users in a community, right? Mm-hmm. So that affects tariffs, right? But my view is there isn't any one right answer, right, or right philosophy. And what I mean is the best solution, in my view, for the African energy crisis is one that embraces all the distribution models, right? So we need utility scale projects like we've seen in the REAP, right? Because those provide scale, those provide quick delivery onto the grid. We also need slightly smaller what we see in the commercial industrial space. This is the small scale embedded generation. Okay. So industries that use anything from 1 megawatt to 10 megawatts, and they've got the roof space or they've got the land. So on-site generation. We also need slightly smaller than that, which is now the micro/mini grids, where we can connect, 50 to 100 households quickly, particularly in the remote areas, right?
Yeah.
Where there isn't any existing electrical infrastructure, and there's not going to be anytime soon, right?
Yep.
We deploy mini grids quickly. And then the really smaller ones, this is for at individual household level, right? We need those as well. And then the last one, which is called Picogrids, where this is basically where you provide people with, say a small solar panel with a charger and a little outlet for a fridge or for a TV or for a radio, right? So you need businesses that address the entire gambit of project sizes, right?
I agree, yeah.
Because utility scale, as you rightfully said, won't have as much of an impact on the small community, right? The embedded generation, small scale embedded generation, will be targeting blue chip clients and won't get to the small community that can only pay $2 or 20 Rand or whatever, right? So you need business models that cover the entire breadth. Otherwise, in my view, a segment of society will be left out.
I agree. Yeah, I think it makes sense. Yeah, because as you're saying, like there's no one way of doing it, and all these different ways they actually make sense. And coming to rural areas, so a majority of African countries, you find that they're in like rural or peri-urban areas, and I think like the time and the money to install those long transmission lines and all that effort, sometimes you look at it and it doesn't make sense. So having for like rural areas, having those microgrids, I think it will make more sense. I've seen like in the Eastern Cape, the Western Cape, you find that you can also consider hydro because they've got all these mountains and all these waterfalls, and it's something to look at. Now let's switch our conversation to the actual equipment now, the sourcing and the manufacturing of it. Like how is Africa, because since this is engineering in Africa, so I don't wanna like focus on South Africa too much. Does Africa have the manufacturing capability, or let's say capability, and the actual manufacturing of like panels and batteries and all of that stuff? Yeah.
Sure. I'm going to start off with taking us back to South Africa, because this is certainly on the continent. This, I think, the hottest market and has deployed the most, the biggest capacity in terms of renewables, right? So when REAP started out, the department and the IPP office had very stringent, and still do, rightfully so. They were quite right in having very stringent localization requirements, right? So IPPs and developers needed to commit to certain levels of local content, which then necessitated OEM suppliers and manufacturers setting up facilities and factories in country. And a lot of that happened. And what we saw was a boom, right? A lot of manufacturers and suppliers came up through the works and started putting together the different equipment. But unfortunately, what happened with the stalling and the stop-start of the REAP program was, a lot of OEMs had to pull out because, you can imagine setting up a factory and hiring people and getting capex and spending capex rather on the back of a timeline that said in a year your factory would be at capacity in terms of orders, and then 2 years on there's still nothing, but you're still liable for salaries, OPEX, and all that type of thing. So unfortunately, a lot of people had to leave the country, and as a result, so did a lot of the manufacturing capacity. So the short answer is we have the skills, we have the engineers, we have the technicians, we have the know-how, right? But the reality is, unless OEM manufacturers and investors can get a sense of certainty around regulation and around procurement windows and around the whole plan, I don't see people risking their resources and setting up facilities, manufacturing facilities, to support an industry that may or may not open up. Right now, I said let's start with South Africa because a lot of the activity is happening here.
Yeah.
Right? Now, moving further up north, if the guys don't have similar or advanced approaches to renewables, and there's no way they will have the capacity to manufacture. So that's a sad reality that it's a chicken and egg scenario in a sense that you need the demand to then supply.
But you can
to close the demand gap, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's just another scenario where private and public institutions need to come together and jointly craft a vision and the roadmap and have cards on the table and put together a plan and make sure that things are in place when they're needed.
Yeah. Because I was gonna, because my next question has to do with the funding part, and my thinking is sometimes we need to take the approach which says build it and they shall come, but I sense that we don't have the funding to take that approach of build it and they shall come, and I don't know what's your thought on that. Should private sector or government start taking that approach of saying build it and they shall come, so we just establish those factories and then start marketing the technology?
Yeah, so as I said earlier, that private sector and private OEMs actually did that. They
Oh yeah.
built the factory.
Yeah.
And the government never came. The projects never came. So it's really a question of once bitten, twice shy,
That's
right?
shy,
And
yeah.
I mean, we're talking millions and millions of dollars that go into these facilities before you even see a dollar come back through the door, right?
Yeah.
You invest heavily in these facilities. I mean, it's highly specialized. Just the putting together of a solar panel, right, from the aluminum frames, right, to the silicon wafers, the strips, the glasses. It's a highly specialized and capex intensive industry, and you can't, as an investor or a manufacturer, put out these kinds of amounts without any sort of guarantees. You just can't do that.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense at some point.
As a director, as a business owner, you have certain fiduciary responsibilities. There's no way I can go back to my board of directors and justify having spent so many millions without some kind of commitment.
I get it. Yeah, I get it. So the one point also that I picked up, I think from your guys' website, is that one of the benefits that you have is that you're saying that there's no risk when when people partner up with Omang. What does that mean? Like, by saying no risk, do you mean that the way you've structured the funding or the capex for these renewable projects, do you guys come and do the funding yourself and then go and install, and then the user enjoys? Like, how does that work?
It's exactly that. It's exactly as you described now. That so we've got guarantees at various levels of our process to eliminate and mitigate risk for the client. So the first, and perhaps not in any order, but the first risk that we would look to mitigate is that of equipment, right? We will only use premium tier 1 equipment with strong warranties and guarantees backing them. So these are piece of equipment that have been installed over many decades, and they've got a track record.
Yeah.
So that one element. The other element is around the actual engineering and installation, right? So we only work with professional registered engineers, companies that are ISO certified, with all the SHE kind of approaches to implementation, all the requisite insurances, professional and public liabilities, so again, no exposure to the client there, that the projects are installed and signed off by professional engineers, as I mentioned, with all the certificates. And then from financial risk, right? Because as an independent power producer, we retain ownership of the assets. The client never has to pay any capex or any amounts upfront, right? It's zero.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Down payments, nothing upfront, right? So we take all that risk, all the liability. We use some of our money, some of institutional funding, commercial bank funding, specialist funding, and we foot the bill essentially.
Yeah.
And then the client only pays for what they use or what they've signed up to use. So financial risk is basically non-existent for the client. So when you look at those that combination of elements, this is why we're able to say zero risk to the client.
I get it.
You know exactly what you're getting, right, in the agreement that we sign up. You know exactly what size solution you're getting and how much energy you can expect, and no surprises. We also mitigate financial risk in the form of price increases. So we cap escalation to it's typically CPI linked between 5 and 8% for the duration of the agreement. So for 15 to 20 years, what you'll be paying from year to year, right? Unlike other utilities whom I won't mention, you don't know from year to year.
Some 25%, then
25%, 18%. You never know, right? You can't plan your life, particularly if you're a big business. You can't forecast accurately. But with us, if you're paying, 1 rand today, make sure you'll be paying 105%, right, a 5% increase.
Yeah.
So you mitigate that risk as well, right? And so it's that combination of factors that we're able to say to our clients and our partners, it's virtually no risk to them.
All right, cool, man. Now, Mr. Moyo, in closing, what's the future like for Omang Energy and energy in Africa in general? Like, if you look into your hourglass, not your hourglass, it's called an hourglass, and try to predict the future. Like, how do you see the renewable energy in Africa, and how is Omang gonna look like in the coming years?
Sure. I think maybe to start off, you're an entrepreneur as well. You're a business owner, and you can't do what we do without being optimistic, right? we always think the future is going to be great, and so that's really the foundation. That's the starting point for us. But when we come down to the nuts and bolts of it, as I said in the beginning, that some 700 million people in the world are without power. Right, 75% of those are on the continent. So there's no question of demand, right? The utilities, Eskom, ZESCO, ZETDC in Zambia, BPC in Botswana, all these utilities in Africa are singing the same story, the same tune, right? They're all facing massive constraints. So they're not able to meet the demand on their own. Right. So that says to us that the opportunity is there. Commercially, there's lots of opportunity, and it won't be filled or plugged in the short term. Certainly, short to medium term, that's not going to happen. Right. From a renewables perspective, right, there are a couple of macro level pushes, if you will. Right. Things like the Paris Agreement, where countries in the UN signed an agreement, a legally binding agreement, to work towards minimizing or keeping global warming to 2 degrees in line with pre-industrial levels, right? So the world has converged and they've agreed that we need to get sustainable around energy. We need clean solutions, and so there's that macro level push. There are also the sustainable development goals, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and one of them speaks straight to our core business, right? And that is reliable and affordable clean energy to everyone, right?
Yeah.
And so we've got all these pushes on a macro level. On a micro level, closer to home in South Africa, as of last year already, we're seeing a lot of movement in terms of regulation and regulatory changes. The government is, and I must say kudos to it, is pushing quite hard to remove the red tape around who can put projects, the processes to put out projects. And that in turn has a knock-on effect with the various stakeholders, the lenders, the project developers. Everyone gets comfort, and, the train starts to move in the right direction, if you will. And then, the last thing really is around the cost curve, right? In the last 10 years, the cost of solar has dropped some 80%, right? From the time when I got into the business, 80% cost reduction, right? And that curve is still dropping. So the projects, or the cost of deploying these projects, continues to decrease exponentially, right? Which means to our customers and to the end customer, they're going to continue getting cheaper, affordable power, right? And people that can deliver these solutions in a reliable manner, are gonna survive. So our outlook is quite bullish. We're really optimistic, and I think we've got a really great team internally, and externally. We've got really, really great partners. People, we've all been in the industry for quite some time, and we've seen it evolve, and we're quite bullish about the future, and I think our business is going to do really well, and I'm quite excited, in fact, to be a part of the African energy story changing and changing for the better. Yeah.
All right. No, thank you very much, Mr. Moyo, for your time and for your insights. I think you've shared quite a bunch of useful insights that whoever's going to be listening to this podcast is going to benefit from it, and I'm looking forward to having more discussions. I think this is not the first and the last discussion that we're going to have. I'll be like, from the Engineering in Africa podcast and brand, I think we will be interested in walking that energy journey with Omang. Try, if you will allow us, document some of your successes. So if you guys succeed in something, let us know, and then we'll most probably have an episode about that, and then see how it goes.
No, absolutely. I look forward to walking the journey with you as well, and thank you again for the opportunity. We need platforms like this. We need you guys, the people that can create and curate good content, and inspire our people, right? Knowledge is important, and the useful application of knowledge is important as well. So platforms like this are quite fundamental to what we need to see happening on the continent. And look, we won't only be sharing our successes. I think a big part of advancing as a society, as a civilization, is to share our failures as well.
Definitely.
We've missed the mark. We share that, and let it be a lesson to other people. The market is big, the need is big. If someone else can learn from our mistakes, that'll be wonderful. So looking forward to sharing our entire journey with the team at Engineering.
Thank you. All right then, sir. Cheers then.
Thank you again.
All right.